Hello, my name is Dan Klimek with Sisk & Company, and our safety meeting today is going to be on minimizing hazards from changes in the workplace. Basically, we're going to talk about something called JSAs. This is something that I'm sure most of you guys are doing because it's a pretty common activity in the oil patch. The question is when you do a JSA, are you taking it really serious to maximize the benefit from it, or would you do it because you're trying to just pencil whip something to say that you really kind of just got it done? What I really want to point out to you is that a JSA can be a very important part of working safely. It's a means of systematically looking at the workplace hazards and making decisions about what are you going to do to control those various hazards. If you can control the hazards, you're likely to help prevent injuries, and that means you being safe and not getting hurt. It's important that all people on the job are aware of what everybody else is doing. So you want to review the steps, you want to review the job, you want to talk about the hazards that everybody has, and let people have input into the types of things to make the job safer. So those are the key things we want to look at for a JSA. When we start talking about a JSA, you'll hear JSA, which is a job safety analysis, but increasingly what we talk about in the oil patch is really a job safety and environmental analysis. With this, we want to take a look at what are the safety features or safety concerns that we're going to be working with. What are the health concerns that we might be exposed to? What are the environmental impacts of the stuff we're doing? Because for us to be good citizens and be aware of the kind of the global issue of how do we really maintain safety on a location, we need to look at safety, health, and environmental concerns. The first step of a JSA is to really take a look at the job and kind of break it down into its key steps. Look at the key step, ask the question, what are the kind of things that can go wrong? What are the hazards that I've been exposed to? What are the things we need to do to make sure this job goes correctly? And also at this point, start to ask each other, have we ever had an experience where this step has messed up, somebody's gotten hurt, there's been a close call, there's been another kind of an accident or incident? The second step is when you identify all these possible hazards, is to look at what do we do to try to prevent them or to keep them from becoming a serious injury. Is there some way we can eliminate the cause, or is there something we can do to serve as protection so that the hazard may exist, but we're going to protect ourselves from it? And again, what things have worked in the past? What are your standard procedures? What are your standard practices? What are the safety rules that you have that might fit these kind of situations? And then you want to try to control those hazards. You want to ask yourself the question, is there a less hazardous way to do this work? Can we actually make some physical changes in how we're going to proceed? Maybe this might be tools, equipment, or whatever to make the job less safe. Is there some way we can engineer out the hazard? Do we have to do the job this way, or can we do it some other way that really will minimize the risk to the people that are working on it? You want to communicate all these changes in the work practices and the flow of work so that everybody who's working together on this job knows what the hazards are, knows what the actions are, and they know what to expect from crew members. We always want to take a look at procedures. If we're doing a job and we have a procedure and the procedure doesn't really seem to fit right, we may have to slow down, go back, talk to folks, find out if a procedure needs to be changed to make the job safer. Now, it's easy to change a procedure and actually make the job more complex or introduce some other unintended consequence that actually makes the job a little more hazardous. So you want to be very serious about procedural changes and understand that just because you change something here doesn't mean that it hasn't affected something else over in some other part of the job. You also want to ask the question about personal protective equipment, PPE. What type of things should be used to protect you? The hazard still exists, but when we use PPE, what we're saying is we want to at least protect ourselves from the consequence of that hazard. Another thing that's very common is this concept of management of change. What will happen is that as a job is proceeding and as work is going, something will come up and people are maybe wise enough to see the change and say, hey, let's stop. And then they do something different. but they never think about the total impact of what they just did different. And if you look at the major kind of accidents that have happened, normally they involve where there's some kind of a change or a deviation or something a little unusual or different that this particular time we did it this way. So the concept of management of change is a huge issue when it comes to working safely. So take a look at it and look at how can we proceed? What do we have to change? Do we have to change anything at all? If we make a minor change here, what are the impacts for some of these other things that we may see that are downstream of that change? It's a very important concept, something that you need to think about as you're looking at how do we work safely. Another issue with JSAs is to understand that most of the operators and most of your companies will have safety procedures and policies. They may require some work permits. One of the common is hot work. So you'll look at confined space, you'll look at maybe barricading, lockout, tagout. All these are procedures you need to follow. Lockout, tagout. This is a way where you're controlling energy sources to make sure that what you're working on is safe, that all the energy sources are controlled. You need to make sure you follow your lockout, tagout procedures. You need to follow confined space procedures. You need to identify what the confined spaces are and know that there are things like tanks and hatches and maybe trenches, and follow the rules, the procedures, the permits for confined space. Hot work, this is where you're using some kind of a flame or a spark producing tool, or you're doing a job that produces sparks or heat and you're using it in an atmosphere where there could be a fire hazard. So you need to make sure that you're following things to control those atmospheric hazards so the work you're doing doesn't create a fire. Barricading, this is kind of a soft way to try to keep people out of an area that may have a hazard. You want to try to warn them. It's not a replacement for railings and guardrails and fall protection and all the other type of things that are required. It's really meant to be just something to serve as a little bit of a warning that says, if you come over here, watch this. We need to make sure we understand the kind of barricading that we may be doing. So in review, you want to follow the rules and procedures that are set up to make the job as safe as possible. You want to make sure that you're communicating the total scope of the job to everybody involved, and that everybody that is going to be part of the job understands what everybody else is doing. You need to follow the procedures and permits that are required for the job, and understand that safety is a full-time responsibility, that each one of you has a personal responsibility to work safely, not only for yourself, but for your family and for your coworkers. This presentation is available at www.gomsca.org.